Third Quarter Shutout, our football podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm joined by Lockwood
Hello?
and Joe.
Hey.
In today's episode, we're going to be moving on, looking into the new season coming up, and taking a start this week by having a look at some of the upcoming rookies in this year's draft, focusing mainly on players that we suspect are going to be top 50 picks who play on the offensive side of the football today. We've got some running backs, we've got some receivers, a tight end, and a couple linemen. So we'll have a little chat, talk about different players that we like, where we think they might land, what we think their range might be, and what we think they could get up to in the NFL. Before we get into some of our favourite players, we're going to take a look at the player that I think at this point it's more likely than not he's going to be the first overall pick. The way that the off-season's trending, the moves that the Titans have made, who they have and haven't brought in, it's set up pretty nicely. Everything that we're seeing on the social media and different insiders are saying, it's looking like this is going to be the case. So, Lockwood, tell us about Cam Ward.
Yeah, so the Miami Hurricanes quarterback, he's bounced around quite a bit in his time in college. I started at Incarnate State, then going to Washington State. He's put up a really good year in terms of quarterback play. A lot better than a lot of the QBs entering into the draft. 67.2% completion percentage. He got 4,313 yards and 39 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. So it has been a really productive year, and he probably is the only guaranteed quarterback to go in the first round this year. I think he's definitely going to go number one overall to the Titans. I'll say just as we're recording this, Tim Boyle has signed, so obviously he's got his veteran backup. Obviously, where that leaves Will Levis, I say you can't do another year. If you're the Titans, can't do another year. The Will Levis experience that didn't go to plan at all. So yeah, I think Cam Ward is the bona fide number one overall pick.
Yeah, he's interesting. He's definitely the best QB in this class. It's not difficult to see. Now, would he go number one overall in the past few draft classes? I don't think so. He's not going ahead of Caleb Williams. He's not going ahead of either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. But he's still definitely a guy who should be going in the top 16 of most NFL drafts. His play style is interesting. It's been described as sort of boom or bust. He loves a big throw. That sort of intermediate to deep level. That's where he's happy slinging it to. But I think if you look at what the Titans have done, they've really sort of put their cards on the table as to, this is what we're doing. They've reinforced their offensive line. Dan Moore Jr., Kevin Zeitler, both got big contracts to come and play for them. J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski, the last two first-round picks for all the Titans, both on that offensive line. Their wide receiver group, Ridley, Burks, Van Jefferson, it's not a top receiver room, but you're certainly not thinking that's the biggest issue, we need to address it. They've got a nice backfield duo of Pollard and Spears, and they've got a second-year offensive head coach in Brian Callahan. It really feels like the Titans have gone, right, we've looked around, you need to build first, then get your QB. We've seen what happens when teams get a QB first and expect them to elevate a bad team, and we've seen what happens when teams get a good team and get them to elevate a rookie QB. It feels like the Titans are starting to do it right this time. Whether or not Cam Ward's going to be the correct guy for them, we don't know at this point, but it certainly seems like everything the Titans are doing is sort of steering the ship towards making it Cam Ward's team.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you described his style as boom or bust, and I think it's a really interesting. The way he plays to me is just so. I can't wrap my head around it. He is kind of just. He just sits there. He sits there. And it helps that Miami's O-line was incredibly good this past season, and they have some talent on there. Not kind of top talent, but as a unit together, they're really good. And I think he makes sense for the Titans. Now, you said kind of everything that they've done has pointed towards them taking Cam Ward. I disagree slightly on that in the sense that you look at everything they've done on the offensive side of the ball. Yes, I'd 100% agree with you. You know, they've done wholly overpay for Dan Moore Jr. 80 million. But then, I don't know, kind of when free agency started and everything that they were doing, you look at the defensive side of the ball and it didn't look like that at all. And it's only in the past week, really, that, you know, he's become that consensus number one, and I don't think he's going to be shifted from that spot now. Yeah, and, you know, now that we've spoken about the consensus number one guy on everyone's, not boards, but on everyone's mock drafts, we're kind of going to go into not the players that we think are going to go kind of top, or not the players that we think are going to be best, but we're going to go into some of our favourite guys. So these could range from round 1 to round 2. We're aiming kind of 2 guys in the top 50 that we think are going to be, you know, some of our favourite guys, whether that be measurables, whether that be attitude, a whole host of different things. And I'm going to start off, you know, we talk about attitude, and to me, one of my favourite players in this draft when it comes to that sort of thing, it's got to be Will Campbell out of LSU, offensive tackle. He's had a lot of kind of controversy when it comes to measurables and kind of where he's actually going to play. Right now, he's a left tackle for LSU. However, his pro position could range at left tackle, left guard, or centre. And that all falls down to his arm length. You know, you look at his height, and he's got good height. He's 6'6". However, his arm length is 32 and 5/8, which is 14th percentile. You look at his hands, and he's got relatively small hands. He's not the heaviest tackle ever, but, you know, at 319 pounds, he's definitely got some weight behind him. But ultimately, he doesn't care about any of that. He only cares about the fact that he's been a true freshman starter at left tackle since day one. And, you know, when you're playing for a team that consistently finishes in the top 25, and you've been a left tackle consistently since you started at college, there's talent there. There is 100% talent there. Just kind of, before we kind of throw it to you guys, kind of what you think about him. He ran a 4.98 at the combine, which, you know, for someone at 319 pounds at 6'6", is fast. He had a 32-inch vert, and he had a 113 broad jump, which, you know, all of those are really good. Just kind of looking at some of his strengths is he's smart. He's a smart football player, which is why a couple of people have spoken about him possibly being that centre. He's really good in pass protection. His footwork's good. Say what you want about his arm length and his hands, but he knows where to put them. He knows how to kind of get an anchor on someone, and they're not getting to the quarterback there. I will say, obviously, we've spoken about kind of some of his measurables there, and, you know, can he compete against some of those top edges in the NFL? That's the biggest worry, which is why more than likely most people have him projected to move inside to left guard, which will probably cause his draft stock to drop if a team doesn't think he can play tackle. You know, you're looking at kind of the likes of Peter Skoronski, where he didn't even get a chance to play tackle. They just moved him straight inside. I will say a couple of things that kind of possibly go unnoticed in terms of weaknesses for him, just to kind of level it out. He's got quite a narrow base, and he plays quite high as well. He struggles to get down in his stance, looking at kind of some of the tape that I've seen. And his narrow base, you know, it'd be interesting to see, especially against some of those heavier pass rushers, if they put on like a bull rush or something like that. You know, if he's not got the longest arms and he's got a bit of a narrow base, is he just going to kind of get beat by a bull rush quite often? But, you know, I'll go to you, Joe, first. Kind of, what are your thoughts on Campbell and kind of what you like about him, if you do like anything at all?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Really, he is that Skoronski. That Skoronski is his pro comp. Like the short arms, but a good, very good college tackle being kicked inside the guard. That is where he profiles. I will add that, like, I did see a stat earlier from Nick Underhill, Saints journalist, and he was talking about the fact that Fawaga, when he came out of college, he only had 33 and an eighth inch arm length. So it's not like Will Campbell is ridiculously short. Obviously, the short arms are a concern, but I think Fawaga's proved this season that you can come into the league and still make an impact at left tackle with decent, like with short arms. I wouldn't say it's the worst thing in the world. I really do like Campbell as a prospect. I think he rightfully probably is the best offensive line prospect in the draft this year. There are others that I'll touch on later that I also really do like, more pure tackles. But I think Campbell will be a good offensive lineman for whoever he ends up going to.
You both mentioned the size, but not to sound like a cliche here, it's all well and good, like, having concerns about his build or his hands or his arms or whatever. If you know how to use them, it doesn't matter. You know, NFL scouts, NFL GMs, they're all experienced. None of them are first-time people doing this. They know how to evaluate talent. If he has the talent to play offensive tackle, regardless of these measurement concerns, he's going to play offensive tackle. The combine isn't the make or break of a player's career, but considering the concerns that people do have about him, he had a good combine. You know, the combine numbers he had sort of reinforced what people already thought about him. You know, you mentioned the 40, the vert, the broad. They're all impressive for offensive linemen and people of his size. I think we'll find out whether a team thinks he can play tackle or not come draft day. I think he goes top 6. A team's taking him because they believe he's the left tackle of that team's future. If he, despite him maybe being the most talented offensive lineman, if he does sort of fall to, the mid-teens range, then it's probably because there's sort of a general agreement that he is more likely going to be moved inside. So moving on to my first choice, I've gone for a tight end. Probably not going to be the first tight end off the board, but I think this is why I quite like him. I'm going for Colston Loveland as my player. Most people's tight end 2. Very well could be tight end 1, depending on the scheme specifics of it. 6'6", near 250 pounds. Pretty impressive player from Michigan. He's not a polished blocker, but he's got elite hands that make up for it. You're looking at him, he's not going to be a big impact in the run game. You're not looking at him as being a lead blocker. But if you need a big physical vertical threat, a big bodied receiver to play that tight end role, he absolutely could be that. He's essentially an oversized wide receiver, going to create great mismatches between coverage with his size and his physical traits. He has a contested catch ability to be both a red zone threat as well as just boxing out defenders anywhere on the field. Really interesting is the sort of yards after contact chance as well. Once he gets the ball in his hands, he's a physical runner. He's looking for contact. He's not trying to avoid tackles. If a player's coming in to stop him, he has no issue going through that player and continuing. For me, he really has sort of the potential to be a true QB's best friend. If you're looking for a tight end to be that matchup, safety blanket, a valve, whatever terminology you want to use, as that player to support a QB, whether it's a young QB, whether it's sort of QB just on the edge of the top 10 who could use one more elite receiver. For me, Loveland really has that chance to be him.
Yeah, it really does, and I liked the fit of. It came a bit of a cliche before free agency that Colston Loveland, he's a Bronco, and then they signed Evan Ingram. But I really did like that fit in a Bo Nix led offense, having that safety valve of Colston Loveland underneath doing like underneath routes. I really liked that fit. I think he does have quite a large range in the first round. I think Tyler Warren probably goes top 10 for me. So I think anywhere from probably the Colts at 15, I think probably is the start of his range. I think the Colts quite really do need a tight end and could quite easily go for him. But in terms of his receiving ability, his quality, his average receiving yards this season were 10.4 yards a reception. As we were saying, as a first down every reception, you take that every single day.
Yeah, you 100% would, and you've touched on his range there, and I don't know. I think if a team needs him, if a team needs that kind of mid-level range sort of receiver, because you can line him up at tight end, you can line him up as like a Y, you could line him up in the slot, and he's gonna get you yards. And a part of me does think, Tyler Warren's a really, really good player. Part of me does think with Loveland, is him slipping a little bit? Kind of, is it just prospect fatigue? Because we've been talking about Loveland last year as well, and you see it with a couple of guys that either aren't ready for the draft or decide to stay in college for a year. You do get that prospect fatigue. For me, Loveland's fits. It's anywhere that needs that mid-level receiver. Realistically, and I'm not saying they're going to take him, he could go to the Cowboys. I think the Colts are probably the most likely, especially if Warren goes in the top 10 like we're expecting. But man, I need him on the Chargers. I need him back with his old head coach. Because the way I kind of think about it as well is you've got McConkey, who he's just a great player, as proven from last year. Now, all it takes then for the Chargers to overhaul that offense a little bit is, let's say, for example, they take Loveland. If he does fall to them, Quentin Johnson's been very hit or miss, but you've then got that short, medium, long kind of receptions, and I just see him thriving in an offense like that. But ultimately, I think whichever team's going to get him as a player, they're going to get Dog. He's so good. Kyle, you touched on his kind of run after catch ability, and he's just physical. Like I say, whichever team gets him, they're just going to absolutely love him.
I mean, you've both mentioned the other tight ends in this class. We have a look at, like, if you take them out of it and sort of put him into previous classes, how many previous years would he be the unanimous tight end one? Now, it wouldn't be last year because of Brock Bowers, but I think only in recent memory, I think only Warren, Bowers, and maybe Kyle Pitts would be the only tight ends who you'd go, well, we'd rather have them over Loveland. I think Loveland's tight end won in a lot of other classes.
Yeah, so next up, I want to move the conversation over to running back. So obviously in a class, really deep class, headline bash and Gentry. I think one of my favourite running backs this year is Amarian Hampton, the North Carolina lad who plays for North Carolina, 6 foot, 221 pounds. He had a really good combine as well, ran a 4.4640. He has had a really, really good year for the Tar Heels. He, on 281 carries, hit 1,660 yards, and 15 touchdowns in total, which is a really, really productive year. I think he is a really weird candidate in the fact that, he has a large range. Obviously, he could go in the first round. He could go really high in the first round. A lot of teams in the NFL need running back. I think his range starts probably at 10 from the Bears. It's probably the pick after G&T goes. Amarian Hampton could quite easily go. I think the Bears could quite easily take him. I think a whole host of first-round teams could take him. In the same breath, he could end up slipping to the second round because of the depth at running back this year. That's a thing that it's happened a few times. A few years ago when the tight end class was really deep, everyone expected 2 or 3 tight ends in the first round. I think we got Dalton Kincaid, and that was it. The rest of them started falling into the second round just because of how deep the class was. People punted it and thought they could wait. But I think Amarian Hampton is definitely deserving of a first-round selection. He is the bona fide, I think, for me anyway, number 2 running back in this class. I think if there wasn't a near Heisman winner, who arguably should have won the Heisman in this class, he would be the best running back in this class. So I really like Omari Hampton as a prospect.
He's so good. He's so good. Like, he's just fluid in everything that he does. Yeah. And like you say, if it wasn't for Genty, there's the possibility that he's a top 10 pick. Like, maybe not that. Maybe I'm kind of getting overexcited about him. But he's so good. He's reliable as a pass catcher. Granted, I wouldn't call him the top 3 pass catcher out of the running backs in the class, but he's got kind of relatively soft hands when it comes to, as a running, just kind of how he sees the field, how he finds the gaps in the runs. He's just got burst. And as soon as he finds that hole, he's powering down the field. He's kind of almost like the perfect mix of a running back between kind of a bit of an elusive back and a power back. He's always going to fight for your yards. You're going to tackle him and he's going to end up with 3 extra yards. But at the same time, don't be surprised if you can't tackle him because he's fast on the field. I know his kind of 40 time was all right, but it wasn't kind of anything to necessarily write home about. But listen, his on-field play is just something that teams are going to love. And now, when I've kind of just had a couple of looks at kind of which teams could take him, do the Bears take him at 10 if Genty's off the board? Maybe. Do the Cowboys take him? Maybe. I'm going to throw this out there to you. I really like him at the Steelers. I really like him as a Steeler. They've built up kind of that decent O-line. They've got the receivers. They need a quarterback, and they're probably not going to get Hampton because they're desperate right now. They can't bring Russ back. I have concerns about Aaron Rodgers going there. But listen, he's going to be great. He's going to be great. And we're saying this about a lot of these players because we're picking our favourite players, and it just so happens that we tend to all really like the same players. But Carl, you've winced a couple of times with some of the stuff that I've said there, so I'm going to throw it to you and see what you say.
I don't dislike him. I still think he's the second best running back in this class. I think he's a little bit more one-dimensional than you two do. If you put him on the right team, I have no doubts that he could be a special player. If he's going to a team that is a pass-heavy team, I'm going to be concerned with how they're using him. He is, at best, a serviceable, in my opinion, pass catcher out of the backfield. He's certainly not bad at it, but it's not his strength. It's not.
He's going to be a screen guy.
It's not what he's going to build his career on. His pass pro is not great. He's willing, but he doesn't quite get it right. If you're relying on pulling in your running back to be that 6th blocker against the rush, so your QB can get the pass off, he's not him. I think if you've got a running back in this version of the NFL who isn't an amazing catcher and is neither a fantastic blocker either, you've then got to have a second running back on the roster who can do it. And you can get away with having a two running back offense. Plenty of teams have done it in the past, but it's just, where is his landing spot then if he's going to need that second player or a specific offensive scheme to help him succeed? Everything you've said about his sort of the vision, the speed, the power, they're looking for contact, and taking the ball. As a runner, I love him. I just think without that extra piece to his game, I don't know if he's quite as early as the top 10. Still, in my opinion, a first round running back. As I said, still my second favourite running back in this class. But I don't think he's quite sort of literally one step behind Genty, maybe.
I think this year as well, as I touched on, it's not so much that he's not got that element to his game. He's not going to go as high. There's a massive need for a lot of teams this year for running backs. I think there's a lot of teams that could do with a standout guy, a number one running back, and he will be that from early on in his NFL career. So I think need's going to push him up the board a lot more, as well as just that added bit that he's a brilliant talent. He's got all these good aspects to his game.
Okay. Yeah, and moving on from Hampton, my next kind of favorite guy, and one of my favorite guys in the entire draft, to be quite honest. We're looking at Jaden Higgins for Iowa State Cyclones. He's a receiver. He's currently stood at 6'4", 215. He's built like a prototypical X receiver. You're kind of going to want to stretch the field with him, and he can do that. He can really do that. Just kind of looking at some of his stats from this year, just kind of quickly kind of rolling into it. 13.6 yards per reception, 1,185 yards on 129 targets, 87 receptions. Mainly, like I said, lines up wide in that kind of X position, can line up in the slot, and he has done this past year. And 9 touchdowns as well. So kind of not a huge touchdown machine, but he's really good. I think he's one of those guys that he's definitely a day 2, kind of round 2 guy for me. Would I be surprised if a team traded up into the first to try and grab him? No, because I feel like there's quite a few teams that possibly need that to take a punt on a number 1 receiver, especially kind of that X position to stretch the field a little bit, because a lot of teams have kind of quite undersized guys who are kind of really good from the slot, can move about. But, this is a true kind of Jaden Higgins is up there somewhere sort of guy. Listen, I like him for a lot of teams as well, mainly for mine. I'd love the Pats to kind of get him. But, yeah, he's just one of those guys where he's likable. He ran his 40 times a lot quicker than anyone thought it was going to be at the combine. And he's just going to be a possession. He's just going to be a possession receiver. He's going to be able to make reliable catches, even with his big body. He's not kind of the most athletic guy ever, but the way he's able to move with his body kind of creates some separation with his body. Not all kind of big body receivers can do that, which is why, he's one of my top guys. He really is. So kind of, I'll throw it to you, Kyle, first. What do you kind of think about Jaden Higgins, kind of where he can go, some things you like about him?
I mean, I think he's a fantastic player. He was actually going to be one of the 2 players I chose to talk about until, in a quick sort of, pre-record check, make sure we haven't picked the same guys. Turns out we've both gone for him, so, sort of graciously let you talk about him. But very happy because it means I technically get a 3rd player in. I think it's fantastic. Like, I compare him to some of the other receivers in this class, and it's not a weak receiving class necessarily. It's not as star-studded as last year, but I think the thing that this class sort of struggles with the most is players who could go on to play that true X-receiver role. And, as you mentioned, Higgins absolutely does have the potential to be an X-receiver in the NFL. You mentioned teams sort of potentially trading up to get him. You get into that first round, you get the 5th-year option on that player. If you think that Jaden Higgins is the 33rd, 34th best player in the draft, it's probably worth trying to get that 5th-year option on him, because if he then goes on to be that true X receiver that presumably you're drafting him to be, having that option can really help you in the long term as well. I compare him to some of the other players in this draft class when we're looking at sort of not big boards as such, but player rankings, and started off sort of wide receiver 8 just because name value of others had them higher, and then you compare them and it's like, well, hang on, no, he's better, and you keep moving him up, and then all of a sudden he's wide receiver 4 and you've got him in the first round, and you go, well, that can't be right. So you're like, screw it, we'll just put him at the beginning of round 2. That feels good.
Yeah, I think one of his main standouts, outside of his size, really, is route running for someone so big. He creates a lot of separation through his ability just to run routes cleanly. Just touching on what you were saying about his 40, he ran a 4.47 at the combine, which I say compared to other receivers in this class, especially of his size, someone like Tet ran at 4.5 at his pro day when he.
Tet's was his pro day, so it's unofficial, but he ran somewhere
Yeah.
between a 4.5 and a 4.6 apparently.
So I'll say he's quicker than Tet. He stands out in that regard, that he's just a fluid runner who has speed. And yeah, I think it's one of them where he will end up probably going, as we said early day two, probably. I think someone will trade into the first round. I do. I'll say this for a lot of prospects. I do like him for the Saints, but yeah, I think we're all going to end up fighting over him, because I think all our teams need wide receiver.
I'll be honest. Ultimately, there's a team somewhat towards the end of round 1 that needs an X receiver. He's not their typical kind of style of receiver, but they tend to just go for the same guy over and over and over again, and it doesn't really work. And I think by his smile, Kyle knows who I'm going to say. And who do you think I'm going to say?
I don't want to say it, but if it's who I'm thinking, that's evil, and I don't want it to happen. But it's a very good pick.
Go on.
Are you going to predict the Chiefs by any chance?
I thought. Oh, so I thought the Chiefs as well, but.
Oh no. I was going to say the Packers.
He's too good to be a Packers first round player.
Well, this is the thing.
The first round receiver, they don't go to the
It's
Packers.
early for him, but you look at kind of all the style of receivers they've got. They're all the same person, just in different numbers.
They
all do very similar things. Whereas you give someone like Jaden Higgins a chance, you stick him at X, you can still do all kind of the weird stuff that you like to do with some of your receivers, but you're freeing up other guys as well. You're giving Jordan Love a deep target. I hate the Packers, and I never want him to go to the Packers because I love this player. But I kind of just see the fit there. Really think that Higgins is going to be a number 1 receiver for a team. I do think he's going to be. And he's, after Tet, he's the next X guy. He is the next X guy, because Ibuka's not an X, I would say. Burden's a slot. Matthew Golden's not an X.
There is one other.
There's kind of.
We'll.
I know there is.
We'll leave it for
now.
We'll leave it for now. There is one other who could be that X2. So we'll let Lockwood take over with his second player.
Yeah, so I touched on it earlier that I was going to be talking about an offensive lineman, and I'm probably going to talk about the best pure left tackle in this class. And if it wasn't for his knee injury, I think he'd be getting a lot more pop at the top of the first round. I think Josh Simmons out of Ohio State probably is the best left tackle in the draft. I think the knee injury, it just depends on the physicals. I know there was talk of him wanting to complete Ohio State's pro day. I don't know if he's going to end up doing that or doing his own workout for teams, but I think he does have that luxury of might be able to sit his first few games of his first year and kind of grow into an offensive line instead of just being plucked and plopped straight down and into a bad team's offensive lineman. So yeah, 6'5", 317 with 33-inch arms. He's kind of just a prototypical left tackle at this point. He fits the mold of what a left tackle is in the NFL. And I think he's going to have a really good career. I've heard obviously talk of teams like the Chiefs or those sorts of teams who they probably do need a tackle, but can have the luxury of letting him sit if needs be to recover fully from his knee injury. So I think that might be the crux of it all. is he might need time to sit, and some teams can't wait, so might end up thrusting him in and doing more damage than good. So yeah, I think he's probably going to be towards the back end of the first round, just because of those fears about his health. But yeah, I don't know what you guys think. Throw it over to Kyle.
If you look at his highs are very impressive. They are why he's talked about in the region that he's being talked about of that first round pick. Your teams that you've mentioned, I think they're good choices for him. Not to go full U2, but if you think of the Eagles model, draft to develop, you could take him. If he can start day one, great. You've got yourselves potentially, hopefully, a franchise tackle. If he's not ready to go, if you've got a contingency plan there, you're laughing. That's what you need. I think there are a lot of teams who they're not necessarily willing to trade up or trade down for him, but if they fall to him, if he falls to them at their pick, they're going to be very happy, and they're not going to sort of hesitate to write his name on the ballot and submit it.
No, and I think it really does depend on how far he falls because of the knee issues. Because that there is going to be a team that he's going to fall to them, and they might be there sprinting his name in because he does have the talent. Now, I do think he's not got as much experience as some of the other tackles in the draft. That could hurt him, because when it comes to offensive linemen, sometimes you want the more experienced guys because they've seen a little bit more in terms of kind of how to defend against certain pass rush. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple of teams late in the first that could do with the tackle that they can give him time. I think the Chiefs is still, if he falls to the Chiefs, I think if I'm the Chiefs, I take him. I know they've just kind of overhauled their offensive line a little bit, but you look at him as a prospect and you think, I could possibly sit you for a year, wait until your knee's healthy, and then off we go. And I do think he is in that vein. I don't think he's going to be starting straight away, especially because of the knee. And it does make me think, I think Simmons drops to the second. I don't think it's very kind of late in the second. If I'm the Giants there in round 2, I'm not opposed to taking Simmons. Absolutely not. Massive O-line needs there. They've had experiments and they've failed. But, you can cope for a year with what you've got, and then you've got a true left tackle that can protect your quarterback that you possibly look to get next year.
That's where he needs to go. He needs to go to a team that there isn't that screaming need for him to come in and start straight away. I think there are a few of those teams around, but there are more teams in that sort of region that do have that screaming need, and that's what concerns me with him.
Yeah, and which is why I think he will fall to day 2. I think he will fall to day 2. I don't think he should in terms of talent level.
So to round out the show, we're going to go to my second player. Already teased him a little bit earlier when we were talking about the receivers. My second player is kind of a mixture of a couple of guys we've already talked about. For me, I've chosen Ole Miss receiver Trey Harris. 6'2", 205 pounds. He's the guy that I was talking about as having the potential to be X-receiver number 2. It's him or Higgins, depending on what you like. The thing with Harris, you have got to take a gamble on his upside. He is coming from that Ole Miss offense. There's a lot of issues with players coming from that style into the NFL. It's a very different style of offense. Do players necessarily translate? But if you take off the rest of it and just look purely at him, I think that he can be. He might have had the limited route tree that you get from playing receiver at Ole Miss, but if you look at that size, it really contributes to his ability to be able to play with strength, make those contested catches that you want from a bigger receiver, but also he's effective as a blocker and he's a willing blocker. And there's so many NFL offensive coordinators, they look for receivers who are willing to go out there and block in the run game or in the screen game. And he looks like he's having fun when he's doing it. The thing with the size, it's not limiting him as a receiver though. It doesn't limit his route running or his footwork. He's got really nice footwork for a guy the size that he is. 3 years at Louisiana Tech. In those 3 years, second sort of receiver on the team, 500, then 900 yards, 14 touchdowns across the two. Went to Ole Miss, just short of 120 receptions, 2,000 yards across the 2 years, 15 touchdowns there. It's a really sort of nice receiver. And for me, I think if you're willing to take a gamble on the upside, he has the potential to be, if you're looking for a star X receiver, behind Tet, I think he is that guy this year. My range for him from sort of pick 30, so just at the back end of round 1, down to sort of pick 45.
I think the thing with Trey Harris is, you touched on it, it's how well does the style of Ole Miss football translate, because it is different. You look at his yards per reception and it's 17.2. I think I read somewhere. I'm not kind of quoting that, but it's fairly high up there. And it's one of those things where it's like there is a limited route tree, and a route tree can be learned, and you can develop that as you're coming into the NFL, dependent on the team, because team needs are going to be different things. He's got nice size. He is a little bit light for a true X receiver, for me at least. I think he's got good height and he's got good size. He's built well for an X receiver. For me, I think he could possibly do with putting on a couple of pounds, just to kind of help him in the blocking, at least at the NFL level. But I do think, like you said, you kind of covered a lot with him. He's a really good blocker when it comes to blocking. He is going to he's going to stretch the field. He's going to catch a jump ball and he's going to get yards doing it, sort of thing. He's not going to be that kind of guy that you can move about. You could play him in the slot if you really wanted to, I think. He's not going to be a stereotypical slot, but you could throw some packages in and you say the Texans, and I quite like that. I think for me, and Joe's going to like, I kind of have him possibly at the Saints as well, especially with his range you mentioned, kind of being from the 30 to the 45. The Saints sit quite nicely in that. They need kind of that true X receiver that's going to stretch the field. They've got Olave, they've got Rashid Shaheed, who has speed, but sometimes can struggle to be that really deep kind of jump ball guy. That's not his game. No matter what, I think his success is going to fall in. He needs to be that jump ball guy. Now, I'm a bit lower on him than you are, and I'll give that, because I'm, we debated. I went for Higgins, you went for Harris, sort of thing. They're definitely X 2 and 3, or 2A, 2B, however you want to look at it. But I think, to me at least, they both bring a couple of different things. He's nice. I just think he needs to refine the route tree a little bit more, and ultimately needs to go into a good situation for him, where he can kind of have someone that can kind of lob the ball up for him and let him make them jump balls.
Yeah, I'll say I do. I love the fit. Like you say, give me a receiver who's over 200 pounds. Because currently we have 290-pound receivers in our room that struggle with the run blocking, and that's the style of receiver that we need. A big, a jump contested catch receiver who can roam over the middle of the pitch, can be on the boundary, just winning contested catches constantly. I think, again, as we said with the Packers, I think he could be that if Higgins has gone, he probably is that player that they'll probably end up pulling the trigger on to be that difference maker. The difference to what they've got in that room in Green Bay. Or the Steelers could just go and have 3 of exactly the same type of receiver, and become the menace of the really exemplify AFC North football. Having to stack him on one side and run the ball to that side, I don't think any defense would want to see that coming.
He can be that true kind of deep threat guy, and I like him as that. I really do. I think I need to see more from him, and obviously you have seen that little bit more from him, Kyle. And it's one of those where it's like he's one of those that excites me, because for me he is true kind of boom or bust receiver prospect in this draft.
You talk about the average yards per game. Fair concern, but if you look at his sort of career, 2 seasons at Louisiana Tech playing, first year full-time playing, 40 receptions, average 14.3 yards. Second season, 65 receptions, 14.4 yards. Went to Ole Miss, 55 receptions, 18.2 yards. Last season, 60 receptions, 17.2 yards. Yes, you can say, well, okay, Louisiana Tech doesn't play the most difficult opposition. He's got an easier time against lesser quality opponents, in theory. And then you go, Ole Miss, he's just being asked to run a go route for 50% of the game. It's going to have inflated stats. But when he's putting up a similar style of performance in 2 completely different offenses, at some point you just have to go, well, maybe he is bringing some of this X factor into it. And I think even if he doesn't work out and establish himself as a true X receiver, he's still got potential to be a really solid wide receiver too in a lot of NFL offenses.
Yeah, so that brings us to the end. Thank you all for watching or listening. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing or following us down below, we also find all our socials, X, Instagram, TikTok, they're all linked below. And until next time, see you later, guys.
Final note, you said you got burnt by a receiver, and I just thought you were talking about your linebacker days again.
Ha 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 ha. I was good in pass coverage, I will have you know.